informed us that the parents said he had to run home and get something.
Oh,
So you're not crazy, he was here.
He's just hanging out there.
I'm not still crazy, but
Okay, it's 5:30, so we will go ahead and begin. Cindy, can you read the mission statement?
Sure. At Decorah,
Oh, actually, yeah, let's hold that until after the public hearing.
Over here, yeah.
We'll do the mission statement when we get to the regular meeting, so you can warm up. Okay, so we have a public hearing regarding the proposed budget for the 23-24 school year. Have we received any comments, written or oral?
I have not.
Does anyone wish to address the board about the proposed budget? Seeing none, we will adjourn that public hearing and call to order the regular school board meeting. And now, would you like to repeat our mission statement?
sure. At Decorah Community School District, we embrace student learning and well-being as our fundamental purpose. We will, in partnership with our students, families, and community, make the world a better place. The mission of the Decorah Community School District is learning, thriving, creating our legacy. The vision of the Decorah Community School District is Decorah Community School District will be a collective, innovative, learning-centered organization empowering students to embrace their personal strengths and create their future.
Thank you. Well, I thought that by doing that before the roll call, we might have given Mr. Petersburg a chance to arrive. But we will note that the door just closed and maybe that's him. And it is.
here I am.
We're stalling just long enough to make sure that you're here for the roll call. So, no, by way of roll call, that all directors are present to the common for. Old business, we have second readings of some of the board policies and specific sections thereof. So we had first reading previously. You want to refresh our memory on the administrative positions?
Sure, we added with the proposed adding of the special ed. I forget exactly how the state defines it, so I just borrowed that language, but I believe it's a special ed supervisor, which is, we thought it was a special ed director, but we just went off of what the state calls for the licensure. So we added that as a position because that would be an administrative position we'd have next year.
Okay.
Do you want me to do them one at a time, or do you want me to do them all?
Let's do it one at a time.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions or comments or suggested revisions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the revision to 303.1.
I so move to approve board policy 303.1 administrative positions.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Then similarly, the wellness policy, title 7.9.
I kind of mentioned this is pretty common to do this about every 3 years in conjunction with your nutrition site visit to make sure you have an updated wellness policy. Worked with a team led by the teacher team led by PE folks to get this revised. It's kind of, I think it's well thought out. It's not just food and nutrition, it's movement. And so communication with parents. But a nice policy to have in place and some things that we're doing and some things for us to work on.
Your recommendation would pass this?
Yep.
Based on this recommendation, I make a motion that we pass or approve student wellness policy in 507.9.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and then we also have a second reading of the 900 series on school community relations.
Yeah, so one of the things that I made sure, I know Brian talked about last time, making sure we included the Allers and Cooney stuff that we added. And so this has stuff like political phone bank prohibited, community use of school equipment and use of school buses, which is stuff I'm not used to seeing, but that's fine, and that it's in there. ISAB added like unmanned aircraft, drones, operating during a public emergency, so hopefully the best of both policies. Spent some time with the community use of facilities, making sure that we incorporated what we had and is working in the district. Thanks to Adam and Lois on that, and then Lois and I actually spent some time wordsmithing it so that it got down to one page. I think those are the big ones on that. Oh, one more. It's got the visitors and volunteers, and we kind of looked at that earlier. One of the things with the help me out, Vercuda check-in, Vercata for check-in. So we are already, so when you visit a school and when we print out a badge, you put in your driver's license, and that's our screening background check part. So the nice thing was we had talked about as an administrative team, how we're going to do this. And then since that discussion last fall, and us getting the Vercuda being able to, it does it automatically. So we didn't add, so we kind of added something that we wanted to do anyway, and it helped us meet the policy.
Are there any questions or comments about the 900s?
I'll make a motion, we approve the series 900.
One second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This is an exciting milestone because the 900s is the last one. We've reviewed all of them.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
hey, we made it on through.
Yeah.
Good job, everyone.
35 pages.
Okay, I would now entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, consent agenda. I did not see anything requiring separate attention.
Want to verify the management plan?
Did you see the management fund one, Brian?
Me?
Yeah,
Again, I'm really happy to tell everybody here that we don't have to worry about that anymore. I
okay,
have no investment in the A&J Pittsburgh Agency whatsoever,
okay. Question answered.
although it was a pretty good 42 years, but
Yeah, emotional investments only.
our school
Okay.
meetings-
We'll save your
School
loading for
meetings go
public
a lot
comments.
quicker now.
Yeah. Okay, so there is nothing to be separated, so we can do them all at once.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, this is the time for communication from the public. Does anyone wish to address the board? Going once? Okay. Next, Mr. Hurst, please fill us in on the strategic plan. And so you have a great deal of preparation has gone into this from the looks of things.
You know, and I was also just trying to keep my comments brief at the same time, but there's a lot that goes into studying a school for a whole year, especially when you're coming in new. So there's a lot here. Certainly, if there's a lot of questions or comments or things, we can certainly go that direction. My goal is to kind of give you an overview of where we're at this year, some highlights of some different things, and kind of take some deeper dives into areas that have been identified as maybe areas for future growth and reflection. So if you pardon me here, I'm going to kind of operate two screens. I think if I'm doing this right. Are you
You're gonna get it on the little laptop.
this one or this one? Okay. Okay. Facebook?
There you go.
Yeah, it just.
There we go. Okay. So, obviously, many of you have just seen the news that we have been awarded second top performing high school in state of Iowa. So one of the things I wanted to kind of do with this is to sort of highlight, what does that mean? You know, we won this award a couple times. How do we win the award? What goes into determining who gets first, who gets second, who gets third, and sort of then where do we go from there? As you can see up here, a big part of this is based upon how we do on our ISAS, which we just took in March. Pretty consistently over the years, we have scored very well when it comes to proficiency. So mathematics, 91%, reading, 95%, science, 85%. So that is a big chunk of it. But that's not the only thing, because there's a lot of people that obviously take these tests and do quite well. The graduation rate, 97%, helps us out quite a bit. And perhaps what really kind of sets us above our competition is just how we do on advanced level courses, specifically AP courses, and our pass rate for AP courses, which is pretty phenomenal. Think about, like, you look at this number here, 38% of our students are taking at least one AP exam, and our success rate of that 38% is pretty phenomenal. So of that 35 pass. So almost everybody that's taken an AP test is scoring a 3 or higher. So that means you're earning college credit. If you dive a little bit more, it kind of also does break it down into some other factors that are, I guess, worth understanding if you want to understand the overall ranking. And there's a lot that goes into this. It's an index that's based on how, you know, U.S. News and World Report decides to create it. So they create what's called the College Readiness Index, which basically, as the name would imply, is how ready are our students to be successful in college. Now, when you start to break it down on a national level, you know, yes, we're number 2 in Iowa, but there's a lot of high schools in the country. So number 3,994 doesn't sound so impressive, but again, we're stacking up against lots of high schools across the country. Within the state, we would rank 6th with that ranking. The curriculum breadth, which basically the scope of offerings that we offer in the high school. Number 8, proficiency rate on the state assessments. Number 4, performance rank. Number 3, graduation rate. At 97%, there's lots of schools that have a metric close to that. So we would be number 140, but there might be a lot of schools in that range. So we've got a pretty good system going. You can kind of see here, if we're 140 for graduation rate, it's not so much our graduation rate, it's these other factors that are really leading us to be awarded at the level. If you kind of look at it a little bit more deeper dive, you can see here kind of how the test scores break down. The blue bar represents the state average. So pretty much above the state average in all the different areas, math and reading. Like I said before, here's our breakdown for people that take an AP test. And then what you really want to do if you take an AP test is you want to score at least a 3. A 3 will get you at least elective credit in in colleges. It may or may not allow you to exempt or not take certain classes, but it does allow you to at least get college credit. In some places and in some schools, you won't necessarily be able to waive no matter what your score is because they want you to take their class, but it still obviously prepares you to be successful in those classes. So you kind of think about it a little bit more, this idea of college readiness and rigor and where does that all come from? Well, a big part of it, and I'm going to give a lot of credit to my predecessor, Kim Shepard, and the staff that came before me. All this award is based upon how we did last year. So I don't mean to preclude or suggest anything that, oh, Brad Hurst came in and we made. This is really a system that was already built and managed very well. One of the things that has been built really well is just the scope of offerings that we have. You can see here, this is our course guide for next year, but it remains intact. All the NICC courses that we offer, all the AP courses we offer, Project Lead the Way courses, and also other rigorous opportunities, honors chemistry, honors world history, work-based learning, which is a growing thing and a growing need. And one of the nice things about Decorah High School, and certainly this is one of the very attractive things when I was looking into this position, was that all these courses are taught on site. That's very rare. Most schools would farm this out. I know, thinking about Mason City High School, we had Nyack and right next door, so kids would have to drive to Nyack all the time to take these courses. We offer these courses with existing staff, which allows so much opportunity for kids in terms of the ability to get help from a teacher that they know, that they trust, that works in their school, to go in during flex times and get help. I mean, it's just amazing that we have that level of support. And to the extent that we can maintain that, that's going to be pretty important for our continued success. Other ways we can look at our performance as a school is to look at our Iowa school performance profile. This is a state public report. Basically what it does is it sort of creates an index score for lots of different metrics. And as you can see, and probably as would be expected, we are above the average. The average for a score for the state of Iowa. This is across all schools, all different levels, elementary, secondary, 54.65. We're at 63.5, which would put us in the high performing category. I'll show you in a little bit. There's other categories you can meet. We're not in the highest of the high categories, but we're in the next level below. And there is no high school in the state of Iowa that's in the top category for whatever reason. So here's kind of how that breaks down. There's 1.47% of schools in the entire state of Iowa are classified with a score of 66 or higher, which is exceptional. And there's only a handful of schools, mostly suburban elementary schools or very affluent areas of the state, would earn those scores. But we are in the next category, which only 12% of schools in the entire state are in, which is this high performing category. We've been in this category historically for the last few years since this performance profile was created. If you want to kind of understand, well, what does that truly mean? I've been able to sort this. This is all the high schools. So if you kind of narrow down the other alternatives, you can see here this bar representing, okay, at what point do you score at high performing or higher? And there's Decorah High School right there. Okay, so it kind of gives you a sense. Yes, there are some high schools that score above us. I remember off the top of my head, Denver was one of them. Gilbert was one of them. And then Waverly was over here covered up by your box. So there's not too many that are scoring at the level that we are, but we're also not scoring at the highest possible quite yet. Which brings me to my point. You know, you talk about being this great system, and you can spend a lot of time kind of, you know, patting your own back and celebrating your own accolades. But one of the things that you really understand if you try to be a good school and a high performing school is you've got to continue to stay there and be there, which means you can't just rest on your path to accomplishments. You can't just be comfortable. You've got to look at where are the opportunities for us to truly thrive and grow as a school system. So this is my little moment of levity here. So in my world, Frozen has been a big part of my life since my daughter was born in 2016. So I've probably watched Frozen 2 100 times. So if you don't read the references on it from Frozen 2. And really the song, The Next Right Thing, right? So you think about, you've got this great system, this high performing school. What's the next right thing to do when you're doing this good? Like, you can't just stay comfortable. So one of the things I preached a lot this year is how do we get a little bit better every day? You know, you think about, and I know Rick might get this reference. There's a person in SAI, her name is Dana Schoen, and she talks about this idea of this amalgamation of 1%. What does that really mean? Well, that means if you take, you take 1.01, which is 1% better, times 365 days a year, you get 1% better at that rate. You can see the math of where you would end up if you did that, right? So it's not improvement, and really great improvement and high achievement isn't so much about this grand sweeping gesture of a new idea or bright shiny thing that you would do. It's about a dedication of what you're doing well, but to continue to improve in that area so you get a little bit better every day. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things I wanted to do is in the last meeting we had last March, we talked about this idea of this student analytics software. And it was kind of a very expensive item. It was pricey, but I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about, well, why do we invest this? Like, what can we do with this? So this is kind of a snapshot of the overall screen for the student analytics lab. You can see all the different things you can examine, which would include a district overview, district pulse, which is basically on a given day, like how are we doing with attendance, grades, behaviors, and so forth. Early warning systems, attendance, a lot of different ways to look at attendance, discipline, course grade, D's and F's, activities analysis. And this is just the starting point of what we're going to be able to have. Student enrollment, those of you that have been on the board long enough, you probably could rattle this number off without looking up here. But if you didn't know, we tend to average about 150 kids in a class. little more, a little less, and any given grade level. We do pull in students from St. Benedict's a little bit, so that kind of helps our overall numbers compared to K-8. This is our current student enrollment, 589 kids so far. You look then at, you can actually study a little bit more in your demographics. So how do we break down from percentage by race, ethnicity, gender, and low income? This is kind of helpful because one of the things that you can see a lot happening in schools across the country, and certainly in Iowa and elsewhere, is the demographic shift sometimes happens, right? So we've kind of been, I think, pretty stable in terms of how our demographics break down, but not every school and every community is in that situation. So you see lots of communities, you know, where the low income might be changing. Mason City, where I was from, would be a good example. In a matter of about 10 years, their low FCS or free and reduced lunch population doubled. And that creates new challenges and new things you've got to think about. The low or the English proficiency or the ELL services in many schools are also shifting as well. So you want to kind of, this is a snapshot right now, but it's also a number to sort of keep in mind, like, well, how might this change over time? And if it changes, how do we respond to that change? They also do what's called a building pulse, which looks at attendance, behavior, and course performance, grades, pass rates. And you can kind of see here over time, you know, you can see peaks and valleys. And it's interesting if you look at some of the peaks and valleys, again, it's early, but you can see that there's some kind of flow together a little bit. You might look for parallelism a little bit. And if there is a parallelism where there's dips in certain times of the year, you might be curious, well, what might be some reasons why that's happening? What's going on that's causing those dips or changes or peaks or valleys? I thought this was really good news. Sometimes you don't always know, you have this kind of idea of how things might be. So this is what's called a risk level, and it basically factors in or aggregates different data as it relates to attendance, grades, and discipline. And from there, it can sort of calculate at what level are students at risk in those different categories. This here represents kind of the aggregate or the combination of all those factors. And you can see here about 85% of our students are in no risk or low risk, which is kind of what you'd want. A good, healthy system shouldn't have a lot of people that need a lot of support. And you can see here, medium risk and high risk, those combined are just a little bit, it's around 15-ish percent overall, which is kind of right where you want to be for tier 2 and tier 3 support. Some of you may have seen this before, and if you haven't, I don't want to assume that you have. This is kind of an MTSS or systems of intervention triangle. Now, your tier 1 is kind of what happens in your general classroom area. So this should meet the needs of 80-90% of our kids, which you can see pretty clearly with the risk that we're doing that. Tier 2 would be kind of more intensive intervention. Potentially you're talking to somebody outside of the classroom setting, a counselor, potentially somebody that's academic support, Mr. Riley, Mr. Waskow, myself. And then tier 3, of course, would be your most intense. This might also involve a level of special education, student with unique needs and so forth. So our system is functioning pretty well because we've got the percentages that we should have. And not a lot of schools have that. So when you think about that, oh yeah, many schools, honestly, it might be more like 50-50. And then there's really some serious discussion needs to happen about what's happening in our classroom, what's happening with our tier 1 level of instruction, that we have this many kids at risk in attendance, grades, and behavior. You can disaggregate, which means basically break these apart into different subgroups, look for certain disproportionalities or things that don't align well. A couple of things that you kind of notice here, there's some vocabulary you have to learn when you learn the system. A good example of that I had to learn is LEP, which stands for Limited English Proficient. A lot of times you might refer to that as students that have ELL services or English learners. It's just a different way to classify it. There's a little bit of disproportionality there. We don't have a ton of students that have that. So that also does affect a lot of things. When you only have less than 5 kids in a group, sometimes that can really make your numbers look kind of weird. So I don't want to over or underemphasize that, but it's disproportionate. It's also disproportionate with a small sample size. But it is something to kind of keep your eye on, how does that maybe change over time? As far as other demographics, you can sort of see, I'm kind of looking at where do the bars maybe like they're not the same size, whereas there are obvious differences. So you think about low income being a good example. So low income students in our high school, there's not as many that are low risk, right? So being low income in Decorah is definitely something we want to study, like how can we better support that so that students that are low income, there's more that are in that no risk category. There might be some opportunities and things to look at to be able to do that a little bit better. You can kind of get that, you can see that in the medium and the high risk. A lot of times these students are more likely to miss school, more likely to have behavioral issues and other trauma and social emotional needs that potentially other students may not have, that kind of complicates their experience. Attendance data, most common reason why kids are gone is personal illness, followed closely by athletic dismissals and activities. So our attendance data can be a little bit skewed. 85% of our kids are in activities. So they might leave regularly throughout, and we're not just talking like they're only out for one sport. A lot of times they're out for, like if you think about this winter, we had kids that were doing winter sports, speech, band, choir, or orchestra, or all of those, and they had AP this, AP that, college visits and so forth. So we do have a lot of kids that miss school, but a lot of those are for very valid reasons. We don't have a lot of issues with truancy. You can see our truant number here is not that big. So mostly it's for activities or related reasons. We have a level of student that hunts. I thought that's kind of interesting, 259 kids hunting, right? But that's the nature of our community a little bit. So kids will go out and hunt and deer hunt and so forth in the winter time. So, but it's not egregious, like it's part of the overall number that we have factored in. But I also kind of want to highlight that in terms of a couple other things. Days of the week. So one of the things that you may have ever wondered, if you wonder about our bell schedule, because it took me a while to learn it as well, is well, why do we pick, Tuesday and Friday to have flex time? Why not Monday and Thursday, or why not other days of the week? And that actually was a study that did over a couple of years at what days of the week are students most likely to be early for activities. And it was Tuesdays and Fridays, especially in the fall. In winter, because those are basketball days, football is obviously put on a Friday. So that's where flex time at the end of the day kind of helped, because those kids didn't miss as much class time. And the data this year suggests that that's the right place to put it, because that's where the most absences are still happening in terms of days of the week. As far as this is just more attendance data by period, it's pretty much the same, but again, to my point, at the end of the day, kids are missing more because of activities. Discipline here is kind of an interesting study in itself, because you might look at discipline and be like, oh my gosh, the high school, man, they're just dropping the hammer. They got so many discipline issues, but that, as your data would suggest, is not the case. In fact, what we really have is the most common thing that we're calling kids in to talk about is tardies and oversleeping. We don't have a lot of kids going sideways, or we have some challenging behaviors, but when we have kids in the office and we're talking about discipline and tiers and detentions and so forth, it's mostly related to attendance. I mean, yeah, we do have other things, inappropriate behavior, cheating. I mean, we have those things, but they're at a very manageable level. Yes.
I'm looking up there to see vaping, because I've heard that that's been something of a problem.
Yeah. So we do have some good conduct violations here. You can see those right here. Substance abuse policy violation. To your point, we've had some of those.
Our school doesn't actually have it aggregated out, and the State Department doesn't have it aggregated out for vaping. Alcohol and tobacco use violations, but they don't actually have vaping.
Right. There's not a specific code that it pulls for vaping. You got to pull it in the other one.
Unless it's a THC vape.
Well, we do have that here, which is a little different. And one of the things I will say to this particular screen is that you might, if you look at it carefully, you can see here, Mr. Wasco has learned how to spell oversleep a lot of different ways. And so what we're trying to do, and we're working with 5Lab on, is to be able to just have that drop down code pull, because it's a state code, as opposed to how you type it into the log entry. So that's a part we will work on to get that cleaned up. To the point of this, attendance and discipline kind of being a combined thing, we find that we have the most issues with discipline and attendance with our students at the higher grade levels. In terms of the number of times they're having issues, I think that kind of comes a little bit more with the freedoms, They've got open campus, senior study halls, which they can lose for this sorts of things, but learning to manage that freedom, which we know is probably an important skill because many of them are going to college and they're going to have unstructured time. And they're going to have to learn how to manage that time effectively. So there's just a lot of different ways to look at this. I want to kind of get the grades a little bit too. DNF grades. We study this quite a bit every single week. DNF list is sent out. You'll notice that none of this has specific student names on purpose, but obviously the teachers get that information on a weekly basis, and we study that and we look at like who are the kids that are failing multiple classes, why are they failing? So if you look at the breakdown of D's and F's, this was a snapshot. So I bet if I pulled it up right now, it'd be a different number because it's real time. So whatever the current number of D's and F's are at any given moment, that's what it reports out. So at this particular time when I made this slide, we had 169 students with at least one D or F. So how does that break down? Well, you still have, grade of overall course grade. So we're not talking about they've got all D's and all F's. They might have one D or one, right? Still not great, but it's not in terms of overall grades, a little over 5% of the overall number of grades are D's and F's, with just over 1% being F's. So not awesome, but not like super egregious, like to where we can't manage it. If you look at that, how does that break down a little bit differently? Students at the higher grade levels are more likely to be getting D's and F's, especially F's, than students at lower grade levels. Again, a lot of that relates to their attendance. They miss class more, so sometimes they're a little bit more behind on missing assignments, and they've got to get caught back up. As far as, again, disproportionalities, limited English proficient, small sample size, a little bit different than not, but actually in this case, it's better to be that. So there's not like anything that really pops out to me. There is a slight increase among males for being more likely to have D's and F's. So that's just something I couldn't help but notice as well. I don't know if I have a great answer for that on the fly, but certainly I'm aware that there's a little bit of a difference there when it comes to male versus female performance. All right, so then you take all this in like, okay, so now what? Like we talked about studying your system, that's kind of a snapshot. Where could we grow our performance? Where could we grow our profile? So, you look right here in the green, and these are, I think, areas where we definitely are doing well relative to the average or the standard. So graduation rate, 98.5, there's the standard score, 5-year graduation, which hopefully we don't have to do that, but we're doing well there. Proficiencies, we're doing well, and we're getting a lot of points there. I mean, you can always gravitate towards your strengths, but then also look at where the opportunities for improvement. Conditions for learning, which is our social emotional screener that we'll be given here on Friday. It's actually weighted quite a bit. The weighting percentage is 9% of the overall score. So this survey they take once per year is 9% of the overall score of a school. Growth rate, so how much, is every kid making 1 year's growth? So I've been in a lot of high performing schools. I was in Johnson and Waukee, and they would have proficiency rates similar to what we have. So our conversation there, and I'd like our conversation here to be, is every kid making 1 year's growth? Because if the kid's, already really brilliant, they're going to score well a lot of times on the ISAS because of how they are. But did that kid grow a year worth of where they're at? So if they're already advanced, did they grow a year? Okay, sometimes that doesn't always happen. You continue to kind of get this, they perform at proficiency, but did they make a year's worth of growth? Those are two different questions, achievement versus growth. So how can we truly really gravitate towards ensuring that every kid, even the most advanced kid, can make a year's worth of growth? That's a lot harder to do than you might think. And then post-secondary readiness was another area we're like, okay, we're kind of where we need to be, but where could we get better? Because that's also another area that's 9% of the overall value. So conditions for learning might be a leverage point. When I say leverage point, if you remember, Mark Lansher would talk a lot about systems and leverage in areas where you can really do a small thing that can have a big impact. Conditions for learning, when you break down our overall, how are we doing, we're just slightly, not really where we need to be. There's kind of the standard score. We're just slightly below it. And again, this is that social emotional screener. How are kids feeling about school? And we've done a lot of work with this year. We've had a group in called Top 20 Training, and the guy that kind of leads that group, Tom Cody, used this bicycle metaphor that kind of resonated a lot with our office staff and I think with our teachers too. And it's this idea that within a school and within life, you need to have intelligence, but you've also got to be able to relate to people and manage adversity and manage challenge and be able to respond emotionally and appropriately. And you also got to be able to interact with other people. So he kind of goes through this example of you need to have both tires of the bike, right? We're doing awesome here. I think we're doing pretty good here, but this might be an area where we could dramatically improve. And if kids are feeling better about school and about their experience, they're feeling more connected, they have more relationships, they probably feel better about school, so they do better here as well. So it kind of might help both areas. So the idea here is, if you have somebody that's really smart, brilliant person, IQ through the roof, but they struggle to relate to people and interact with people and work with people, you can sort of imagine how that person might be in the workplace, right? Brilliant, but doesn't have those interpersonal skills to be a great coworker. Sort of maybe slightly below average attendant, but amazing at interacting and connecting and empathizing, and people like to be. Again, you can see how that person could be successful and perhaps even more successful than this very intelligent person because they can relate to people and they can kind of form those connections that way to be a great coworker. Of course, the goal would be to be great in both areas. Be really, very intelligent, but also very relatable, very personable, being able to connect with the coworkers and being able to work as a team. So this is my weightlifting part of I talked about this idea, like, okay, this is Tristan Wirfs. He played football, but it wasn't like Tristan Wirfs walked into the aisle weight room one day. He's like, all right, put 405, and I'm just going to clean that up, no problem, right? He had to work his way up. Weightlifting is kind of the most perfect example of progressive improvement, right? You got to lift just a little bit more weight all the time. That's how you get better. So you got to think about this process differently. How could we get better on social emotional? I try to be a little mindful of time. So we do actually have a screener for conditions for learning. So in addition to the one-time survey that counts on our performance profile, we actually use something called My Savers, which is a snapshot indicator of how students are feeling about school. I'm not going to go through every single question, but you can kind of get a sense of what some of the questions are. I argue with others, I lose my temper, I'm respectful, and students have to rank themselves. So this is truly how do they self-report and feel about their experience and who they are as people. There's more example questions. And then from that, it kind of calculates a risk score. How at risk are you for social needs and supports, academic needs and supports, and emotional needs and supports? You can see the different categories there. Here's an example of how our students performed in the fall, 9th grade. So even though this is the thing that was kind of the most kind of profound to me, we have a lot of high achieving students and a lot of students that are taking and doing multiple activities. They're doing multiple high level courses. But the number one thing that we've heard from students, and even in our student leader group, is we're really feeling it. Like it's hard to be at the top, and it's hard to do all these different things, and it's hard to manage all the stress. And they self-report that out because they are being pushed a lot, which is good, but it's also, you've got to learn how to manage it. And so you can see here, kind of some examples of where we scored in 9th grade in terms of risk categories. Again, there's 150 kids, so it's not like it's everybody, but these are the raw numbers of kids that would be at risk for behavior, social behavior, academic, so forth.
Right. Can you look at other high achieving schools and compare this portion of each other?
I cannot see their data. That sounds like I could ask for it, but all you can really do is compare conditions for learning relative to another school. Okay. Yeah, but this part, I don't know if I'm able to see from other schools.
Ryan, can I add to that really quickly? We happen to work with the AA on some of this too, and they didn't share specific data, but they said Decorah's data usually very much higher than other areas of schools. I don't have the exact numbers, but sure, just give you a snapshot.
Good question, though. We could definitely see if we could find some. 10th grade gets a little higher, academic behavior, 21, emotional, 23. So you can kind of see not every grade level was the same. And, each kid's a unique person as well. So but you look at some of as they kind of go up, you notice that the academic and the emotional starts to trend up a little bit. And so one of the things I would hope to do is compare a grade against itself and see how did these numbers change over the years, or do they mostly stay the same? So within that, then, well, how do you get better at social emotional? Right, it's kind of a tough question, but one of the areas you can really look at is this idea of self-awareness and self-management. This is work that the AEA helped us with, so I take 0 credit for this particular slide. But they kind of helped us identify these 2 areas as being ones that if we really could focus on those 2 things, it would have a pretty dramatic impact. So how do you build self-awareness? How do you build self-management? Well, it's actually these kind of what you would call soft skills or universal constructs. So when you teach your class and when you teach kids, how do you teach them? You know, for example, when I taught chemistry and biology, especially chemistry, I would talk to the kids quite a bit about, yes, you're learning chemistry, but what you're really learning is problem solving. You're learning attention to detail. You're learning critical thinking. You're learning collaboration, communication. And you may not necessarily be balancing equations when you're 40, but you'll need every one of those skills in any job you pick. So if you can be transparent with kids about some of those things, it does help. So the question of when will I ever need this in life becomes a lot easier to answer if you frame your course and your learning up in that context of the skills they're going to need to be successful to transcend the content. We talked about this too. This is from Tom Cody from Top 20. This idea of often what we do in life is we get through these challenges and we get to this part where it gets hard. You know, mountain climbing can be the same thing. Oh man, this is so hard, and you want to turn back and go back. And that happens so much in any kind of challenge. But what we, I think, do a pretty good job at Decorah, and what we can continue to do if we reinforce some of those other things, is help them to persevere through the part that's hard to get to the top part. Okay. And the more that we can get them to stick with it and not quit and stay with things that are hard, the more we're going to continue to get better. And that's the idea. It can be confusing, but how do we persevere through that? I'm going to finish with just a couple little things that wrap this up then. Culture wise, the other thing that I've noticed is within our school, just as much as you pay attention and want to support the students, in my role and our role as office staff, we found a lot of times we've got to support our staff. We've got to help each other out. So this idea, you know, help others succeed, which you can kind of see from the picture, you know, how many of us are going to be the bottom panda bear for somebody else and help them up to succeed. You know, if we can kind of help each other out when we need it, the overall system will thrive and perform well. Other things you can do is you can celebrate your staff. So we've had throughout the year what's called Decorah Rocks. You might have seen it if you've read the Viking the last few months. Basically, we've got, it's nothing big, just little rocks and certificates that we hand out to the teachers throughout the year to recognize them. And if you win a rock, then you got to find somebody else to give a rock to and recognize them. And we read their names and celebrate them every staff meeting we have during building PLCs. Other things is see the problem, own the problem. So you look at these 2 pictures, you can kind of see the issue, right? So don't be the person that gets the shovel out like maybe some of you did this morning. And if you share a stepway here, don't just shovel off your half. I mean, it's not that much, probably more work to just do your half than just to go ahead and shovel the whole thing. Or, you know, we'll call this the Nebraska Highway Department at work. You know, see the problem, they didn't move they just painted around it, right? So let's fix the problems, even if they're not necessarily in our job description, because that's what's needed in that moment. I guess the other little thing I would say is just this idea of technology use. So one-to-one devices have been around for a long time. I put this up here not to celebrate myself, but just for the timestamp of it. The 2013, when we handed out one-to-one iPads in Johnston for all of our students. And so we're 10 years removed from that. And so hopefully we've transformed and innovated our technology anywhere there's been a one-to-one 10 years worth, right? But you've got to be really intentional if you're going to do that. So we just approved a whole bunch of money for one-to-one laptops and really nice Mac, you know, Apple laptops. Hopefully across the district and certainly in our school itself, we found ways that because they have that device, they can do things with their learning that they were not able to do without the device, right? What you don't want is you don't want to have a computer that just replaces paper. So the things that you would have handed out as a worksheet on paper, now you go on to wherever and you just type your answers in. That's not really that innovative. You know, as opposed to creating movies and really investing and doing research and finding things and creating things that you couldn't do without technology. That's how you transform learning. And then the last thing I would just say, you know, one of the things I really want to stress is any level of success or performance that we get out of Decorah High School isn't like just Decorah High School. There's a lot of my colleagues in here, teachers that are, you know, in all these different buildings that have built that foundation up. So this idea of all the bamboo, which many of you I'm sure have heard before, you water the roots, you water the roots, you water the roots for years and years and years and nothing grows. And all of a sudden one day, explosion of growth, right? We see a big explosion of growth in the Decorah High School, and some of it, yeah, is for sure what our teachers do in the high school. I don't want to minimize that at all. But some of it also too is because of everything that's been done before they got to high school and all the hard work that people have invested that allow the roots to truly be able to take hold and the growth to really happen. So you know, this idea of us being number 2 in the state, that, as Dr. Cronin kind of put, that's a school-wide accomplishment. That's the hard work of everybody that's throughout the district. So if you want to celebrate that award, do it, but make sure you celebrate the entire staff when you do it. And with that, that's my presentation.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well done. Thanks for all the information. Okay, moving into new business. We had our public hearing regarding the school budget, and now we have an agenda item to consider the proposed 23-24 school budget.
Yeah,
Give us the Cliff's notes.
so cliff notes, I'm like looking for my cliff notes here. This is my, I don't have very good. So I think probably the big cliff note that I would say is putting more money into management fund this year. And working on stabilizing a tax rate. And that's gonna give us an opportunity for more flexibility in the future with either management fund projects. And can't do a lot of projects, but that keeps us open to going into agreements for our natural gas. If the state does anything with the teacher recruitment retention and allowing districts to use management fund to do that, then we've got a little bit more. I think I'd shared maybe in my weekly notes, just ISAB put some information out there about what percentage of expenditures to revenue do districts have, and we're on the lower side of management fund, which isn't necessarily a big concern or anything. That just means we haven't put as much money in there in the past. And then there's some districts that have a huge fund balance, because management fund is kind of one of the ways that the only part of the levy that you can put money into that doesn't really have a restriction on it. So we're just being a little bit more aggressive with putting more money there. We've got that opportunity as our bond payments we're within the last 2 years of our bond payments on the high school project. So this allows us to have a stable tax rate. What did I miss, Kathy?
I think you hit it all.
I haven't looked at our budget for a while. It seems like it's been done forever, but I know those are the big things with it.
Yeah, the only thing that I noticed is the estimated 2023 is high because the purchase of the bus garage and also the purchase of the one-to-ones. So that makes that year look different than the other 2 years.
Yes. And that's gonna be that's part of the amendment to come up.
Is there further discussion, questions?
No, I'm really grateful that Dr. Cronin brings in his, experience and expertise. I think you've had a lot of creative strategies to maintain consistency and just meet our financial goals in the future. So thank you to Kathy and Tim.
Care to offer a motion?
Make a motion to approve the 2022-23 school budget.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, it's been 6 months, so we have to reapprove our ESER plan.
I think we need to set the amendment for the school budget.
Oh, I'm jumping ahead again.
Yeah, so,
Set a public hearing to consider amending this year's budget.
and as Kathy just mentioned, when you set a budget and then you are gonna spend more than you put in your budget. You have to do an amendment so that that's legal. The nice thing is I like on that amendment page, you have to put in, what's the reason? And so the reasons are the one-to-one devices and grant received, just increasing student support services. And then the other one was the bus garage, baseball lights and devices to debt service. So that just, some of those are reversible, some of those are funds from like Pepple Save that we had a surplus in those accounts. But I think it's pretty typical to most districts do an amendment each year with their budget. Because you don't always know, when you're setting your budget at this time of year, you don't always know that well, I guess last year at this time, you probably didn't know you were buying a bus
Oh,
building. You thought you were, but you weren't sure that you were doing it. So,
That was like last 9 years.
yeah. But until you know, you don't put it in your budget. So we just need to set that. And so we would have, just like we had tonight, we'll just have the public hearing for the amendment next month's May 8th at 5:30. We'll start the meeting with that. So we just need to set that public hearing for the amended 2023 budget.
I'll make a motion that we amend the current budget, public hearing, May 8th, 2023 at 5:30.
Second that.
all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now tell us about our return. to
Yeah,
learn policy.
every 6 months is we are going to have to document on our ESER plan that we reviewed our return to learn plan. I think it seems like it's really dated at this point in time, and we tried to put in there references to anything that's going to change with the governor, but this is when Kathy finishes the ESER upload assurances that we reviewed our plan. This is part of that checking of box.
This possibly could be one of the last ones.
That with any luck, and yeah, could be our last one for sure. So nothing new.
I make a motion to approve the Decorah Community School District's ESER return to learn guidance.
I'll second.
Yeah, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now our ritual of spring, talk about summer project.
Yeah, so summer projects, I think a pretty standard process. Superintendent, business manager, we got together with Greg, operation maintenance, Sean, Jim in transportation, Chad from nutrition. We just kind of prioritized what was on our list and kind of pared down a little bit, talked about needs. And so we get together a budget. We looked at it in the fall, once in the winter, and just recently. As I say that's how we did this one. I think one of the things that, and a fair warning to those administrators in the audience, I think we'll just set up times, obviously in future years prior to this list, but we'll set up time this summer where Greg and I come out, we just walk your building, we talk about small and big projects that you guys have. Because that's one thing that I'd like to get more input on is just building principle. And I think we'll probably invite your building engineer to that walkthrough. And we can just talk about not just what Greg and I think, but include the building principles as well. So that'll be a piece that we'll add, not to hijack this discussion, but so that's how we got with this. I know, we put in the big projects we're still waiting to get done. The bus barn is an expense that we haven't encumbered yet, but I think we're Gonna do a walkthrough tomorrow, and that's close. Hoist for the bus barn, baseball lights that we did approve in the fall, and then the turf project, still working with Nick on that. Those are the ones that we kind of already have allocated, so those are in gray, and then all the stuff in white above those are the new ones.
Anybody have questions, comments?
Thanks for speaking to the need to communicate with building administrators, because I think that's super important, and it's important for you to have your eyes on all of our buildings, and because that impacts how projects are prioritized. I know that the baseball lights project is a project for this summer, but I just want to point out that that was voted on last fall. So that has been in the plans for a long time. And I know that it was brought to my attention that, you know, the middle school roof that is listed as a big job for the summer of 2024. Can we talk a little bit more about what we know about the middle school roof?
Sure. We can give the shorter version or the longer version, but we need to fix the roof. There's a couple factors there. And one is just the threshold. Generally, roofs are pretty basic, so you try to keep them in smaller sections, because you don't want to have to hire an engineer and architect to design that. We've got some leaks. We've got just kind of a generic estimate of 500,000, but we're going to look at maybe doing smaller portions. So if we could get, divided into 3 or even 4 sections, we could do smaller sections, and then getting on their list for schedule. I mean, the baseball lights aren't done, and that was a fall project. So getting on somebody's list for the roofs are typically summer jobs. So that's why I just said it's probably not going to happen this summer, even in a smaller portion, but there's, we can at least get numbers and get on a list. So, and I'll look at out there. I know, Jess and I have talked a little bit that there are leaks at the middle school. Maybe it's kind of been that way since the middle school opened. Unfortunately, wasn't the best roof to go from there, but I'll defer now to Mr. Schaller, who's in the audience.
I was gonna say, to be fair, we don't ask the person who just got here. We ask the person who's been around dealing with that thing forever, so.
Yeah, that roof's been problematic since the building was built. It's a light metal, it spans and contracts a lot. The roof will actually get air bubbles in it where the aluminum surface raises 6 inches to a foot, and you can walk across it. And so as it heats and cools during the day from the sun and stuff, it expands. It's just like working on a piece of metal on a pop can or something. Eventually it starts growing. We've been chasing that for years. There's something in there that we moved, and so it's sectioned out, so it can be repaired in sections. The 500,000, I got that number just from a square footage thing. 2 years ago, we got pricing that we do up on John Klein. So I just kind of averaged that out, and then I added $100,000 because of inflation the last couple of years in projects and stuff.
Yeah, I don't remember us talking about the middle school roof during my time on the board. So I'm not sure it's come up before, but I want to make sure that we know.
Number of years since.
Yeah.
Didn't we, like,
We did
5 or 6 years ago,
we tried retaping all the seams. That helped actually. But it didn't. that's starting to pay too.
At that time, when we did that, didn't they tell us, and I don't know if that was the people from, that just go, that,
That was Garland Roofing.
yeah, wasn't there, we had an assessment of all of our facilities through the state? And that was one of the things we had looked at that time, wasn't it? And then the recommendation, I think we get Garland Roofing come up, but then they say that we might have to, redo the seams every 5 years.
Yeah,
So what you're saying, I think, is instead of continue to do that every 5 years,
that was,
take the,
I'm pretty sure that was a $80,000 project.
was it?
Yeah,
And what you're saying is take off the metal roof and build a roof.
Yep.
And maybe in 3 or 4, or whatever, how many different periods of time and do it in sections.
yeah, that's all built in sections, so. We'll start with our most problematic areas, the gym comes to mind. The library. There's places here and there, and flat roof or semi-slope is what they call it, but they're problematic anyhow, like a fixed roof, you got ice dam or something and water will set.
If I remember right, it's a roof that they just wasn't used very often either, right? It was a roof that probably more than likely a different type of roof probably should have been put on there at that time it was built.
Yeah. That, they don't even make that style roof anymore.
Well, that's encouraging.
Is there salvage we can sell to somebody else so they can use it?
For what? Whatever they want.
So if we had to do it all over again, we would not, right, get that type of roof.
Yeah, this is not something that's been talked about recently. It was kind of we addressed it a number of years ago and hope to hang on for a little while, and now it's time to
I
talk
just,
about it again.
yeah, I think it's important that we just, be strategic about
Mhm.
prioritizing and knowing what our financial needs
Yeah.
are.
Absolutely.
What is the age of that building? When did it open? 06?
Okay, then, February 2006.
So we've had a conversation about this particular format here. At one time, many years ago, we made a motion and accepted this this report or this document. And then that gave us authority to absolutely, this is what we're gonna do, and we approved it all at once. That's not what we're doing here? Are we looking at the document saying we agree that these things make sense, but as these larger things come up, we would still individually have them on the agenda and approval?
Really good question. I know we brought the baseball lights back specifically because it was a bigger project and it was over the limit. I don't know, we just kind of did that. I don't remember having a intentional discussion. Generally, when you put these on the list, there's a number there, and you're exactly right. The number is not always exactly what it costs. And so, the board could approve with a caveat that anything over X number of dollars comes back for, individualized approval if that would help. I don't want to slow down getting stuff done. And at the same point in time, some of this stuff, like, for sure, we've approved the laptop one-to-one devices separately. So we've approved the buses separately. So, it seems like as a de facto, we're already doing a lot of that stuff. Individually, so we could, that's certainly something, if we wanted it over the threshold of 50,000, just when we get the final bid, we could bring it back.
Yeah, it's clearly there's differences, significant differences in projects and how much, supervision they require. Everything from filling the cracks in the
Yeah.
sidewalks to prevent creeping Charlie, which I really don't ever want to have on an agenda. I think that's a fair one to just go ahead and do. As opposed to something like replacing the roof, whatever. So, yeah, I remember as you're remembering it, that was kind of like, okay, we need to think about this systematically. Because in the past, I think it was kind of, yep, everything got approved here, the big fell swoop, and it's all done, and there's never further consideration of anything. And we wanted to move away from that, so I guess we've moved away, but not reached a complete resolution yet. So,
Yeah, I think, as I look at this list of things, I would think, a $50,000 figure might make sense. Because really over 100, they raise the threshold now to 112,
Well,
15 or $18,000.
There's a couple of thresholds. One is just, you have to get bids, engineer or architect at 197,000. My spending limit is $50,000 here. No, 25 was 5,000 in my other district, so 25,000.
What do we
So
need to do to lower it to 5?
would feel lower to 5, just board action. Yeah,
Okay, make it.
okay. I mean, I don't.
you really
Thanks a
want
lot there,
longer
Mr.
meetings.
Petersburg, yeah.
I said 505.
505. And then I'm remiss on, I don't have a number off the top of my head of when you're supposed to get bids, but before you have to hire an architect, or if I just dreamt that number up. But there's also a number out there in my mind that was maybe 80,000, 90,000, but Kathy's looking at me like I'm
Over
over
100 now.
Wasn't it close to 179, 197?
186,000 hasn't shown January 1st.
186, that's the hire, that's get a bid, or that's hire the architect?
That's higher than architect.
Okay. Regardless.
Yeah.
So 50,000 can just be our working number.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? The board members?
Yeah, I think that's a good step. I mean, you just have to draw a line somewhere. It may seem arbitrary in the future to think of, 49 versus 51, but we have to have something to work from, and I think that's probably a good baseline.
I can see the interactive TVs and smart boards and things. That was, I know, and this is the first time I've seen that, but I'm not saying that wouldn't make sense, but I'd like to talk about those smart boards before we go out and spend X number of dollars, because as we walked around the school buildings in the past years, we've seen some smart boards that have things taped on them that been taped on for a long time, and some teachers use them and some teachers don't. So,
And that's probably a good point. Just one more caveat is, it's called summer projects, but it really should be called something different. It should be large capital improvements. For example, smart boards is or interactive TVs is from the subcommittee of the technology, and they're looking at different options. We put it on there as like a placeholder. Their a recommendation wouldn't necessarily be imminent, and it might be this November, December-ish. Is that fair to say? Okay. So some of these are imminent, like we hopefully are gonna fill those cracks and get rid of that creeping Charlie. And for November, December.
We'll certainly support doing so.
So, but yeah, if we want to approve it and with an understanding that anything costing more than $50,000 will be bought back to the board, that makes perfectly good sense to me.
I think that's a step forward.
how do you want to put that in a motion? For one, I like your capital, I guess wouldn't all be capital improvements, but it wouldn't be as much surely as in the summer.
Yeah, it is. It's a large projects.
Major expenditures.
Yeah, and I guess the point is that they're not all capital because they're not all facilities necessarily. So, but, yeah. It could just be called Pepple and Save related expenditures.
Yeah, it's honestly what it is.
Yeah. Well, you guys can come up with the best way to reword it.
Sure, yeah,
what were previously called the summer project list. That we approve this subject to board approval on items with over $50,000. Make sense?
Yes, it does.
I make that motion.
I'll second it.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
50 or 50 and over.
Over 50.
Just making sure.
Fifty is okay, but
Yeah, $50,001, $50,001 penny.
One pen.
Yeah, I did really feel like this is different than, a decade ago. It really was more like summer projects. It was kind of like, we're gonna pour some concrete somewhere, we didn't have lists that involved large expenditures for technology. Those weren't on summer projects.
We changed over time. Yeah.
Okay. Next, we get to thank Ben and Brian and Dr. Cronin for their hard work on negotiations. And of course, Kathy, who crunches all the numbers and keeps everything moving. So we have a tentative agreement to approve.
We have a tentative agreement. Excited. I think I've shared with a bunch of people. I feel like negotiations are different maybe than when I started 10 years ago as a superintendent, where it felt like the goal was to, keep it as low as possible. And, we're trying to do stuff differently. Hopefully that wasn't ever the goal here, but certainly a generous. I've never negotiated, whether it be Central City, Dunkerton, Cedar Rapids, because I was on their team. And our initial counter was 4.11%. So hopefully that was appreciated. We did have a nice settlement at 4.37. Highlights are 875 on the generator base. We did put $50 on the TSS base. I kind of explained that in small groups that TSS really should be allocated and not negotiated. So we're going to shift that in the future. We renamed the shadow base to the recruitment base, and that's going to be 40,000. So no teacher in the district who's full-time will make less than 40,000. We feel like that'll really help the admin team recruit and replenish. And kind of as Brad was talking, those high-quality staff. We had some nice recommendations to the coaching and supervisory. So that's the supplemental salary. We're going to work on a recruitment and retention task force this summer. With ideas that maybe don't cost as much money, but hopefully can work on working conditions and staff to stay. And then we're just the last I guess big thing was just kind of identifying the working down to holidays. So we currently have 3 holidays on our calendar, and this was just an opportunity to relook at everything. So we looked at the 3 holidays and the 2 cancellation days, and we just turned it into 6 holidays. So we added 1 more unpaid day to that, and then clean up some language on how we do days, because in the current master contracts are real descriptive on how many class days you'll have and how many PD days, and we just want to put some of those together and have flexibility. So that's the summary of that. The work that still needs to be done is get the master contract done and get a calendar ready for the board to approve, because with 3 more unpaid days specifically put into the calendar, that will shorten up our student contact year. And then as we talked as a board, we want to put on there where the snow makeup days are. So it'll look different, but my guess is we'll probably get out about the same time as we did this. Well, hopefully we'll get out.
Yeah, let's not shoot for that. That's kind of.
Strike that from the record. Hopefully,
hopefully we get home.
hopefully we get out. Yeah, hopefully get out this year and then next year. But it will require looking at the school calendar and coming back with that. But yeah, excited about that. Happy for the teachers. Teachers seem to be pleased with it. So
we have a recommendation to approve the master agreement.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agreement as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next, understand some people have done some work to get us a grant for a social worker.
Well, the grant is part of the therapeutic classroom and, I kind of walked in and we were like applying for it and excited, and then we got it and they gave us more money than we thought. And they gave us more than 1 year to spend it. And so that's not how grants ever work. So, that was fun. But the team was talking about options and they invited me, to a recent meeting last month, and they just said, could we fund part of a social worker? Because we have some needs with the elementary students that aren't being met, and I shared those, and there's a document on that that Dana and the team put together. So this is a nice opportunity, grant funded. There was a question about how sustainable it is. The state gave us $266,000. We estimate that 3 days a week of a social worker would cost the district. Well, through a full-time social worker, we would put on the teacher salary schedule. To start with, it would be about $55,000, and if we're only paying for 3 of those days, it would be less. Maybe, as an estimate, 30 to 35, and so that's very sustainable with the $266,000. We did double check with the state, and I shared that out that we don't have to have it spent in 2 or 3 years, so we can carry it over for 5 years. And so we're excited about that part, and more to work with students. I'm gonna pause as I'm talking about the social worker therapeutic classroom grant. Do you need to add anything? I know you didn't. I know. Highlights of how what we'd be able to do with this elementary, and it's just elementary social worker.
Yeah, so with the therapy, sorry, I can't stand behind this pole. Talk to you. Yeah, so with the therapeutic classroom grant, it would primarily serve TK through 4th grade, but it would support the recommended right now guidance counselor ratio is 250 students to 1 guidance counselor, and ours is much closer to 550, 600 ratio. So just having more resources in this emotional behavioral health realm, the primary focus would be student contact. So working directly with our students across all tiers. So it could be tier 1 direct instruction, our core curriculum is 2nd step, all the way to kind of tier 2 to tier 3, which would be our most intensive needs in the area of social emotional behavioral health. Talking to our elementary principals, looking at our data, you can see there are more and more concerns in these areas, the area of mental health. And so having someone that can directly support those kids, as well as our amazing teachers and families, is essential. Right now, we have Veda, who has an amazing position, but that's not primarily focused on working with kids, that's with families and the outside community. So this would provide direct service to our students and is out of a grant, so it's not coming out of current budgets.
And we applied for the grant, and we a little bit about how we didn't realize they were going to fund it by size of district, not by what we asked for.
Yes, we wrote an initial grant proposal and then ended up getting about $150,000 more than we originally had, because they just fund you by the size of your district versus what you asked for. So we had an initial proposal that had a lot of great things in it, but because of the magnitude of the grant, we've been able to do a lot of additional things. And staffing would be a huge one that we could do because we have this money.
Who actually applied for the grant?
Thank you.
With support of these, like not just like rogue, but yeah.
Yeah,
That was the first time I met Dr. Cronin was over a Zoom. I was like, and
I remember,
it opens in the summer, so it was all like June, like, hey, here's this awesome grant, so.
Well, thank you and everybody that had something to do with it, because it's obviously when you have something that works as well as this and gets the value out of it, it's amazing, so.
Yeah, and it is very exciting because it was over $250,000. In addition to this, we'll be able to do a lot of professional development, buy material, supplies, curriculum, things like that that are needed in our elementary school. So a lot of great things can come out of it. But even with this position and the sustainability and working, with the state to get that sharing money back, we will still have the funds to build a lot of great stuff in addition to this position.
Now, weren't social workers typically doled out by the AEA Keystone?
So there's a combination of ways to do it, and that was one option. We were not on time, but that option was not for a variety of reasons.
I think the question is,
Or is that-
of the staff that the AA provides, like they might, like a school psych or I think that's the question, like, is that normally a position that's staffed at the AA?
It can
that
be,
the question?
yeah, I think the answer would be, it can go either way, that you can partner with the AEA or you can go independently.
No, you kind of both got a little bit of the question answered. What I'm wondering is, we currently have social workers that help out kids. Yes, and they come from the AEA, is that correct?
Yes, but the majority of their positions is supporting the humans who support kids, who would be working like with the teachers at MTSS means, working with myself, Mr. Varney, and the teachers. They are typically not meeting directly with students and cannot serve that time with students. Every now and then there might be a case, they do things like, for example, if there's a death of a student or a death of a staff member, would they come and support us through that crisis management? Absolutely, but their role is not to meet directly on a frequent basis with our students.
So Iowa and Decorah School District, excuse me, have not had social workers dealing directly with students in Decorah or in other school districts across the state of Iowa. The reason I'm asking is that my sister works in a school district in Illinois, in suburban Chicago. And she talks about lots of social workers and so on like that. And Dr. Cronin mentioned that they're in the state of Wisconsin as well, but Iowa does not have.
And that was the other thing I was alluding to when I first started answering, was you can pay for partnerships. That we would like pay Keystone into a shared partnership with Keystone, so that's another option. But again, we are still paying in, that typically isn't just like a service that we get outright.
But
And Principal, feel free to jump in if there's more information you want to say on that.
what I'm saying is, though, the state of Iowa has not had social workers dealing directly with students, but more the AEAs are providing support to the teachers and the staff and the administrators of how they can actually do it, working with the students. Is that, so this is kind of a new thing for the state, is that correct?
Unless you pay for it. So like you may go to a Des Moines or you may go to a Waterloo, and they certainly have social workers, but again, they're paying that additional money.
Right.
So that they have them, it's just we have not done that yet.
In my experience, it's taken off in the last 5 years for two reasons. I think we see it more of a need. And then it's been, which is the next item, it's been added to operational sharing. So districts have looked at it as a way, like you don't have to bear the full cost and you can get an incentive from the state to do it. But to John's point, I do believe other states, I know in Wisconsin, our district had a social worker that we hired. However, that was in large part because the AA wasn't very strong. It wasn't a service that you were gonna get from the CISA in Wisconsin, so you just had to hire your own school psychs and your own social workers and either share them with the neighboring district or be a big enough district to do them. But I think the big difference is the social worker working more with students directly. So you might see that in a bigger district. If you saw it in a larger district, my guess would be it would come out of at-risk funding. And so this is just a nice opportunity for us.
A lot of it goes, our clientele is changing, we know that, like our kids, our families, the family structure, all of those things are changing and continuing to adapt to meet the needs of our students and our staff and our families.
How many years do you expect?
I think conservatively, we thought 5 years we'd be able to pay for it.
And there is no deadline?
Correct. So the goal is for it to be kind of a starter to get us going, but we did clarify that no, it's not like it has to be spent, at the end of this year, the end of next year, that we can utilize it for.
Because all the money has to be spent.
Yeah, and I think that there's a few, what I consider unique things about this grant from the state. Number one, that they gave us the money ahead of time.
Yes.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, don't we usually have to, we get a grant and it's like, when you expend it, then upload your ledger and then show it, and then we'll reimburse you. So the money ahead of time, that we can use it on people. I don't, usually state grants you can't use on people, and then over time. And Lansing Key or Eastern Alma Key is an example of a district that got it a year ahead of us. And they kind of maybe pioneered or helped part of like, you told the state, if you really want this to be successful, they'll let us carry the money over and let us use it on people. And they've kind of set up they've got a different model, but they're using it as kind of a center, that they're then almost like a crossroads.
Yeah, it's more intensive, the cell therapy at classroom, but that was one of the things we did in some of our research and learning, as we had a group, including myself, who went to Key Connect to observe kind of how they do it and what positive things we can take, away from that and kind of embed in our model here at Decorah schools. And the other thing it kind of comes down to is like, what the grants can all go to. It's going to be things in the realm of social, emotional, behavioral health related to whether it's professional development, whether it's supplies, or whether it's people. And a lot of the people who've received the grant have found like that may be where our most impact is, having additional people who can work directly with our kids.
So, quick question I have is under agenda F and G, they're kind of one and the same. Is F accepting the grant or certifying?
Oh, well, so I guess I separated them because I didn't want to assume. And so F is adding a social worker. So it's adding a position, but we're funding it through the grant. And then G is turning around and saying, okay, we're going to hire the social worker. And then G is turning around and sharing the social worker with Howard Winnesheek, that has already expressed a desire to do that. And so they'll buy 2 of the 3 days, or 2 of the 5 days, excuse me. Which then helps us not spend as much money on the social worker, but then we'll qualify for operational sharing from the state for that.
Are they getting a grant as well? Or
They don't have a grant. They're just,
funded either?
they're probably gonna fund it out of at-risk would be my guess.
Her contract will be with us.
We'll hold the contract, yeah.
And with that, when I did reach out to the state just to confirm, yes, we're looking at a 5-year span, they did share additional ideas for sustainability. So if we do get to that 5 years, things are going really well. There are options to continue to look for funding, support for such a thing.
Oh, yeah, F and G are related. I
Okay.
thought they were 2 separate things, so I listed them.
So we'll understand F to be accepting the grant and hiring a social worker.
We already accepted the grant, we have the money, that's.
So I think it's adding the position and committing to a social worker.
Care to offer a motion?
Sure. Also move to approve the social worker funded through the elementary therapeutic grant.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now, why don't you give us the dime version of the wonderful incentives of the sharing the position?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of different positions, but the state will give you an incentive where not for the 23-24, but when we do our budget in, I guess, the spring of 24, there'll be a line there for it's under the supplemental weighting, and currently the state will increase your enrollment by 2 students if you share social worker. There's actually talk about making it 3 students, but if it's 2 students, then the state will give us an additional funding. Every student is $7,500, so that's $15,000 that the state will, as an incentive, give back to the district. Lots of districts are doing operational sharing. I've tried to share different stuff for you guys to kind of get a brain around as a district this size through operational sharing. Well, yeah, I think I came up with the average, maybe 7, generated about 7 students. So that would be about 2 or 3 sharing agreements. So I'll continue to look for those where it benefits the district and generates revenue. But, believe me, when I first year as a superintendent, when I heard that the state would give you money to share a position, it took my brain a little while to wrap around, because you're saving money on their salary. For example, on a social worker, if the total cost and benefits is $50,000 and we only have to pay $30,000, and then the state gives us 15, it's kind of like you get 3 days a week for $15,000, that's a really good deal. Now, we can't share every position and not every position would be shared, but yeah, that's a dime store version of operational sharing.
And having someone in this role for 3 days a week meets our need.
Yeah, in fact, I think when we started, we were maybe hoping for a halftime social worker. And when I reached out to Howard Wynn and heard they were looking for a social worker and they said they really only wanted 2, then well, we could get the extra day and we'd be pretty happy. So
Yeah, we have a couple, we're working with Amanda Hunt, who's our guidance counselor, as well as other people in social emotional behavioral health who worked on this grant and obviously are admin as well. And through that, we have a couple different potential models of how this could look and work, and will be just, a huge support to our students and families.
So we, by doing our grant, we'll be able to continue longer than we weren't doing sharing.
I make a motion, we approve the 2080 sharing agreement for the social work with Howard Watershed School District.
I'll second that.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank
All
you.
right.
We very much appreciate your support in this, and it's gonna be amazing. So
Thank you for your hard work to get the grant. Okay, the next, we have consideration of something to do with ESSER funds. Why don't you tell us about the need for another position?
yeah, so I know we're looking at FTEs and we're trying not to increase FTEs. We had dropped down. I know when you look at just numbers, lots of times you can just do the math. And you can say, oh, 5 sections to 4 sections. There's not a huge difference there. Certainly, that's always a tough thing for and I've been in elementary schools my whole life, so you have a bubble, you have one grade level go through, have more sections or fewer sections. So I'm probably a little bit more aware of, if they're always in the big class or they're always divided into 4 instead of 5, that does make it tough. Obviously, the students that are in first grade now, their overall enrollment is smaller, so that would be logical where you'd only have 4 sections. But in kind of having discussions and with Rick and Dana, Cliff politely and respectfully, I don't know, nagged me all year long. Still looked at it. Yeah. I said politely and respectfully, and talking with different teachers, and I will say, the first grade team invited me to come over and talk, and they advocated for their peers. And that probably I've never had somebody say, hey, I'll have a different group of kids next year, but I really think that the second grade teachers should have an opportunity to have smaller class size with this group of children. So Dana had shared some data. There's certainly some quantitative data that says there's some need at this grade level, being as if we could give them a gift of 1 year of small class sizes, grade 2, then either their enrollment will stay the same and it could be back to 4 sections in 3rd grade. Or maybe the enrollment could grow and, if it grew, then obviously we'd have 5 sections. So Kathy's help, we kind of looked at the ESSER funds and shifted stuff around a little bit. And this would kind of be the last gasp of our ESSER funds. So that's kind of how maybe the recommendation, I don't know, I probably should pause and see if Dana or Rick have stuff to add about. I guess the problem, then the other question is, does this create problems for us? Does this create problems of space? Does this create problems of?
Yeah, I'd say going back when that decision was made also to last year, and again, respectfully, credit to our first grade team. When we went to 4 sections, we added several students between that decision in the spring over the summer. Which therefore, again, when you add, 8 students, well, there's 2 more kids in a classroom than what we expected.
And then there's something that happens anytime I've been in a district where you've dropped a section, that's right where every child that's gonna move in is gonna, then like they know.
Yeah.
Oh, they're down a section, we better move to Decorah. So that's how that
Just a
works.
little of that back history of when that was stated and made, and then as we move forward, again, we get added more students. Obviously, again, the needs of those students, as you said, is there. So going back to the initial question, moving forward, we are looking to, we can reallocate some of the space we have.
As you were aware, yes, we brought West Side, our preschool into that building. But we've got an idea where there's a classroom that has been used as a classroom before. So it would serve our need. We just need to shuffle some of our services around, so it's not going to impact our classrooms. It would just be reallocating some of the things we're doing day to day. So we have space. That's your answer.
So does the opposite happen when you add a section? 10 students move out?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no. I think I had one year where it was, which one are we gonna drop? Are we dropping first grade or fourth grade? And whatever grade we picked was the wrong one, you know?
Is this class of 94 students the largest number of students in any grade that we have?
No, it's the smallest, and that's why we, smallest in the elementary. And I'm sure if it's smallest in the elementary, it's smallest in the district, because we always had students that 5th through 8th, they kind of trickle in. And definitely add them for 9th grade. So,
Not smallest in the district, but smallest in our elementary.
okay. Oh, because we have that 4th grade going into 5th grade is small.
Correct.
So do we have 5 sections in most of our other grades?
Yes.
And we literally added 8 students from whenever we approved this last April to the start of school in August.
Yeah, there was, again, I'm going off of when
Right,
the
no,
decision was
that's
made,
fine.
so don't quote me on that exactly, but yeah, there was an influx of.
That's quite an impact.
Yeah.
So will this 18.8 students per classroom of next year be that would be one of the lowest student to teacher ratios then?
In the elementary, yes. I mean, it gets a little different when you're middle school, high school, when you're switching around. But
I'm hopeful in the future too, we'll really consider that at the lower levels, that's where you need the smallest teacher to student ratio. When you get to middle school, high school, the kids are more independent. Whereas, I can walk in a classroom and there's 8 hands up and you've got one teacher trying to get to all of those kids that need that person right now.
Yeah, well, I think it's, as you said, very indicative when you've got the people who are teaching them now saying that people
Yeah,
next year need assistance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's recommended to be paid through ESSER funding.
yeah, which it does make it a 1-year
Temporary
solution, but that is what it is.
Do we have someone on staff or are we going outside?
We would probably, I don't think we have any, well, we've got a few openings,
You'll
so,
post it, of course.
yeah, so we actually had an elementary opening and it was anticipated opening, so we'd probably use that pool as well.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'll make a motion to approve the additional elementary teacher for grade 2 funded by ESSER for 23-24 school year.
I can second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Report.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd add, other than I need to come out with a new last day of school,
Might I suggest the next sequential day in
Yeah,
June?
yeah, so anticipate Friday, June 2nd as being our last day, and
Is that student or teacher day?
no, that'll be students,
Student day.
that'll be student. And so
That's a Friday, right?
that's a Friday. And I guess if we want to do small favors, or, at least when we got that one day and we moved the last day to Thursday, I think we said, oh, well, that gives us cushion in case we have one of those crazy snow days. And we did, and we don't need any more. Although I can tell you today's snow day, I didn't get more than 2 miles down the road, and I was like, well, I can't imagine there's any chance we're having school today. It's a little rough out there in Big Canoe. So. I think those are the highlights that, I talked about, put some salary schedules and part of negotiations. We looked at some of that with Brian, and so I just wanted to share my folder that I had. There's the link to operational sharing in there. So yeah, I think those are probably the highlights.
Are teachers coming back? Or are they doing the asynchronous day or?
Well, so the last 2 PD days are asynchronous. One is building directed And we've had some real good, that's already been rolled out and some positive feedback on that. And the last one is a district level kind of technology. And it's designed to be, pre-test where your ability level is, and then that will be what you'll do. We're not gonna go all asynchronous with our PD, but it's nice to have options. And in fact, district leadership team is gonna meet tomorrow, and we'll just talk about that process and get some feedback from them. Because, among other things, that I kind of shared this with the principals, hopefully it's viewed as a benefit for teachers, because if they're done ahead of time, then they're not coming in on Monday and Tuesday, because their PD's done. If they don't have the ability and they're not done, then they just come in on that Monday and Tuesday. But given that flexibility, hopefully is received well. But part of making sure the district continues to offer it is making sure that you put forth the effort and you're dedicated in there. But I think during negotiations, the teachers, we kind of had a side conversation or added that into the conversation. I know Matt was said some nice things about it, appreciated it. And it kind of, I think, to keep talking, even though I was about done, was Matt talked about how at the middle school level, so they were doing the macro courses from the AA, and he was like, well, I had to do, 9 hours, and I just decided to keep going because then I could just get or 6 hours, I just kept going because I was that close, so.
Yeah, I felt a lot more comfortable with it after we talked about it, because it's, you never know the number of teachers who's really gonna create quality time and who's not, and really get something out of it. I probably would think that we should expand it from 2 to 3 or 4, because more control. But that was what they told us, and the way that it was being utilized, and I think I was way more comfortable with that after we had a little conversation.
Absolutely.
I see there's a letter to Maple Campus students.
Yes, thank you.
Has that been sent?
Yes, the Mabel Canton letter has been sent. I haven't heard anything back, so I don't know how well received that was. It's not my intent to, as we discussed, we wanted to make sure that the Mabel Canton, the Decorah students that are attending Mabel Canton understood the parameters of that agreement, so there wasn't confusion. So that's why we sent it. We talked about it at the last board meeting, and that was on my list of things to do. So Ron helped me wordsmith it, and Lois helped me mail it out. But I think there's about 26 families, is that right?
I can't tell you exactly, we took any seniors or any.
Oh, right.
They wouldn't be affected.
Yeah. So, because I thought overall, maybe we have 40 students that are going to Mabel Canton, but it's, of course, some of them are seniors in high school and some of them are juniors, and so they'll just finish out.
Happy?
I don't have anything specific for our report. I was going to try to work on an ESSA report, and I started and then never got it ready, so it will be in next month's packet.
Well, now that we spent the end of the ESSER funds, you can give us a final accounting.
Well, and I spent the last week of this week doing the quarterly reports for all of our ESSER funds and all of our title funds, so those will be coming in direct deposit from the state.
We have possession of all the ESSER funds? Or they're still coming? They're still coming.
That's the funds you spend and then you request.
Oh, okay,
Same thing with title.
okay,
You spend it and then you request the funds to be reimbursed.
got it.
I feel like that's how a lot of grants, a lot of funds work.
Yes.
You don't have any idea how much we have in extra funds left after we get reimbursed what we asked for?
I looked at it the other day and I can't remember. I have my computer here though.
But it is a known number.
It is.
Okay.
Like the current number for ESSER?
There'd be two numbers, one that we have available and what we've. requested
Encumbered.
to
I
encumber.
think about 600,000.
And can we talk about land across the road here with astroturfing?
Yeah, we can, sure.
I mean, not on the agenda, but it's part of ESSER funds.
Yeah.
So we probably can, is where we at with that.
We are at with that, waiting on Nick to, get, an engineer part of the bid ready to go on that.
We talked about us going directly with,
He talked about us not needing an engineer or architect, and I said, no. I said, that'd be great, but I think we do, because it's over 197 or 169 or whatever, 186, whatever this number is. So we actually had Allers and Cooney give us an opinion so that we weren't doing something incorrect. And that opinion was it's a capital improvement and it was over 190, 186, if that's really the number, 186.
196.
Oh, 196. Oh, so, well, it was pretty close.
the Nick's working towards
Yeah.
that to get that.
Yeah, and I
done.
need to touch base with him, so I'll have to get an update on where he's at in that process, because I want to make sure that we get that going as soon as possible. Yeah, for sure.
Unless there is anything else, we will adjourn.